Good morning. Oh, all right. You can hear. All right. My name is Megan Morton. I teach one class a semester here, and you'll find me in the Writing Center over at the library. There I was, walking through my neighborhood here on College Hill. It was a sunny, warm spring day. I'm pushing a stroller with my youngest child inside, and my two other kids are with me. And it's a few weeks before my 40th birthday. And I'm just, mentally taking stock of my life. And I'm just so satisfied with what I see as I think about this. I have a job at Geneva that I loved. I had a great neighborhood and community. I have my 3 kids. And at the center of all this is me, right? The one who, though I wouldn't have really said this if you'd asked me directly, really felt that I had accomplished all these things. And then, a few weeks later, I was summoned to a meeting with the administration and informed that because of the budget, my position at the college had been cut. And the weeks and months that followed were full of grief. I was convicted of sins that I had been hiding for many years. I felt that a core piece of my identity had been lost, and that my sin, my weakness, and my shortcomings were exposed, not just to God, but to me, to my family, and to, the whole community. And so, that feeling when you go to Walmart in Beaver Falls and you see 10 people that you know. Yeah. And during this time, I read a book that seemed to have the answers to my grief. I was like, this is great. It assured me that God wanted obedience, and if I disobeyed, it wasn't too late. I could start obeying now. So I was so excited about this book. I was like, I know I've convicted my sin, I've disobeyed God, but it's not too late. So I was excited. I did what you do when you're excited. I posted about it on social media, and somebody from my church contacted me and said, do you want to write a review of this book for the magazine that goes out to everybody in the whole denomination? And I was like, yeah, great. This is a great book. So I wrote my review and said how great this book was, and it was published. And then right after it was published, an acquaintance, emailed me and said, I really have concerns about the theology of that book. I think it's not right. And I read what she said, and I tried to understand. But honestly, I kind of feel like I sort of thought theology is like the stuff with, young guys with beards and a lot of opinions, and they get on the internet to argue with strangers, right? That was the sort of vibe I had. So I was like, I don't really know. It seems so nitpicky. Like, Jesus died for our sins. That's what we need to know. All this other argument is it's like a hobby for some people. And then later I read the book also with a group of my really close, trusted Christian friends, and they confirmed what this woman had been saying. Basically, this book was a problem because it was promoting this works righteousness, this idea that we have to earn our salvation through our obedience to God. I'm going to read you a quote from Martin Luther about this idea about works righteousness. I think. Oh, yes. All right. Men fast, pray, watch, suffer. They intend to appease the wrath of God and to deserve God's grace by their exertions. But there is no glory in it for God, because by their exertions, these workers pronounce God an unmerciful slave driver, an unfaithful and angry judge. They despise God, make a liar of him, snub Christ and all his benefits. In short, they pull God from his throne and perch themselves on it. I had come to think of Christianity was like being accepted to an exclusive college. So, there are students who have not been great students throughout high school. They don't have great grades. But if their family has a lot of money and, has a legacy and has donated a bunch of money, maybe there are buildings on campus with their name on it. So when it comes to be accepted to college, they are in. Right? But they didn't get in on their own grades, they got in based on their family. But once the student's accepted, the student needs to make the grade. The student has to attend classes, the student has to take exams. And that's how I thought of the Christian life. I thought Jesus had come to bring me into being a Christian. He had died for my sins. But now that I was in, I needed to prove myself. I needed to do the work. I needed to make the grade. And as Luther said in the quote, I began to hate God. I felt like he was a critical teacher, always watching out. Every time I messed up, it was like, there it is. There's another ding on your report card. I felt like I was trapped by my sin, and I had to keep pretending like everything was okay, or people would see that I was a fraud and I was just going to be kicked out. And then in 2020, COVID hit and the shutdowns came as something as a relief for me from my striving and sorrow. I developed a love for theological reading because of this being misled, and realizing that the reason that book misled me wasn't because of the book itself, but because I already believed the things in the book, and the book was just mirroring what I already believed. So I realized that I needed to read good theology to get rid of the bad theology that had taken root in my heart. So I developed a love for theological reading, and my theology began to line up with the truth about God. I didn't know before, I kind of thought of theology as an other people hobby, but actually everyone has a theology. Theology is about the way that you think about God. You have one, I had one, I have one now. And if your theology about God doesn't match the true and living God, then you will not have the right relationship with him. And so I realized I really only understood half of the gospel when I was doing all this reading. I understood that Jesus' death on the cross has paid for my sins, but I did not understand that was not so I could have a second chance. Like if you get pulled over and the cop lets you off without a ticket, and you're like, all right, great. I just saved myself $100. In fact, what he did was he died on the cross so my sins could be forgiven, so that then I could become part of God's family. Jesus is the righteous Son of God, and he came so I could also share his status. I could be God's daughter, not because of anything I'd done or my merit, but because of his. Outwardly, my life looks a lot the same now as it did in 2019. You still will see me walking around College Hill with my kids. I still teach here. The position cut at Geneva was a change in status and salary, but I still get to do what I love best, which is sit down with writers and talk about their papers. I want to encourage them to write sentences that line up and live up to the ideas that they have in their heads. And my students in the Writing Center help me write this. I really love the Writing Center. But God has worked a change in my heart. So there's an inward change. Instead of hating God because I feel like I will never measure up, I am growing in my security and knowledge of his fatherly love for me. God used this experience to show me that ultimately, I'm not an employee, I'm a daughter. In Colossians 1, Paul is describing the mystery of the gospel, and he writes about Christ in you, the hope of glory. My hope of glory is not based on my accomplishments, my life satisfaction, or my status with other people. My hope of glory is that Jesus Christ achieved glory in his death and resurrection. Thank you.